Have you ever wondered what goes through a man's mind the moment you simply vanish from his world? Not with drama, not with angry words, but with a silence so profound it echoes louder than any scream. There's something almost mystical about that moment when a woman who once chased, once insisted, once made herself constantly available suddenly becomes unreachable. It's not revenge, it's not a game, it's something far more powerful. It's the reclaiming of your own soul. Imagine this: you've been the woman who always texts first, who always makes the plans, who bends her schedule to fit his whims. Your phone becomes an extension of your anxiety, checking for his replies, analyzing his response time, reading meaning into every punctuation mark. You've become a detective of his moods, a translator of his silences, a beggar for scraps of his attention. And then one day, without fanfare or explanation, you simply stop. You don't block him, you don't send a final message. You just quietly step back into your own life and close the door behind you. What happens next isn't what most women expect. There's no immediate dramatic realization on his part, no sudden flood of messages begging for your return. Instead, something far more subtle and psychologically profound occurs. For the first time, perhaps in months or years, he experiences the weight of your absence. When you were always there, your presence became like breathing. Essential but unnoticed. But when you disappear, the air becomes thin, and suddenly he's gasping for something he never realized he needed. The human mind is wired to notice patterns, and when a constant pattern breaks, it creates a psychological void that demands attention. Your silence becomes a mystery he can't solve, a puzzle missing its most crucial piece. Where once he took your availability for granted, now he's confronted with questions that have no easy answers. Why isn't she reaching out? Has she found someone else? Did she finally realize she deserves better? But here's what makes this transformation so profound. It's not really about what he feels at all. It's about what this moment reveals about you. Because when you choose to step back, when you refuse to chase someone who wouldn't chase you, when you decide your energy is too precious to waste on someone who treats it as disposable, you're not playing a game. You're making a declaration. You're saying that your worth isn't measured by how desperately you can pursue someone who barely notices you're there. Think about Daniela, a woman who spent months crafting the perfect messages, timing her responses to seem interested but not desperate, analyzing every interaction like a chess match she was determined to win. She lived in a constant state of emotional suspension, waiting for his next move, his next message, his next crumb of attention. But then something shifted, not through anger or hurt, but through a quiet recognition of her own value. One morning, she woke up and realized she was tired. Not physically, but spiritually exhausted from the constant emotional labor of trying to earn love from someone who seemed incapable of giving it freely. So she stopped. She didn't announce it, didn't make it a dramatic exit. She simply turned her attention inward and began focusing on the one person who had been neglected in this entire dance: herself. The first few days were uncomfortable. Her fingers itched to reach for her phone, to check if he'd noticed her absence, to send just one more message. But she didn't. Instead, she went for walks, called friends she'd been neglecting, picked up hobbies she'd abandoned. She began to remember who she was before she became consumed with the project of winning his attention. And something remarkable happened. She started to like herself again. Meanwhile, he began to notice the silence. At first, it was just a nagging feeling, like forgetting something important but not being able to remember what. Then it became more pronounced. Where were her good morning texts? Why wasn't she liking his social media posts? The questions multiplied, and with them came an uncomfortable realization. He had grown dependent on her constancy without ever acknowledging its value. This is where the psychology becomes fascinating. When something is always available, we assign it little worth. It's the principle of scarcity that governs everything from economics to attraction. Your attention, your presence, your emotional availability, when given freely and constantly, they become like water. Essential but undervalued. But when you withdraw that attention, when you make yourself scarce, the dynamic shifts entirely. Suddenly, what was once background noise becomes a conspicuous silence. There's a neurological basis for this phenomenon. The human brain releases dopamine not when we receive a reward, but in anticipation of that reward. When your attention was constantly available, his brain stopped producing that anticipatory chemical rush, but your absence reactivates that reward system, making thoughts of you more frequent and more intense. If you've ever been in this situation, if you've ever found yourself exhausted from chasing someone who barely notices you're running, then what I'm about to share will change everything. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what comes next isn't just about understanding his psychology, it's about understanding your own power. This is about more than relationships. This is about revolutionizing how you see yourself and how the world sees you. The truth is, most women never realize they're operating from a position of emotional scarcity. They believe that love means making themselves infinitely available, that caring means putting someone else's needs before their own. But what if everything you've been taught about love and relationships is backwards? What if the very behaviors you think demonstrate your worth are actually diminishing it? When Monica decided to shift her focus, she didn't just stop chasing him, she started chasing her own dreams. She enrolled in dance classes she'd been putting off, started the business she'd been planning, began traveling to places she'd always wanted to see. Her social media, once filled with subtle hints directed at him, became a showcase of her own adventures and achievements. She wasn't trying to make him jealous, she was genuinely building a life that excited her. The transformation was visible not just to him, but to everyone around her. There's something magnetic about a woman who has found her center, who no longer needs external validation to feel complete. She moves differently, speaks differently, carries herself with a quiet confidence that speaks louder than any words. She's not running towards someone or away from them, she's simply walking her own path with purpose and grace. This is when the real magic happens, when you discover that detachment isn't about becoming cold or indifferent, it's about developing what the Stoics called self-mastery. It's the ability to love without clinging, to care without becoming desperate, to remain open-hearted while maintaining your dignity. It's perhaps the most attractive quality a person can possess because it signals something profound. You don't need anyone to complete you. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the best revenge is not to be like your enemy, and in the context of modern relationships, the enemy isn't the person who hurt you, it's the desperate, anxious version of yourself that you become when you lose your center. When you refuse to become that person, when you choose peace over drama, self-respect over self-sacrifice, you're not just changing your relationship dynamics, you're changing your entire life trajectory. The shift from seeking validation to generating your own worth is like learning to breathe underwater. At first, it feels impossible, even frightening. You've been so accustomed to measuring your value through other people's responses that the idea of being enough on your own seems foreign. But once you master it, once you discover that your happiness doesn't depend on someone else's mood or message, you become truly free. When you operate from this place of emotional independence, something extraordinary happens in your relationships. The people who were attracted to your neediness, who enjoyed the ego boost of being chased, begin to lose interest. But the people who appreciate strength, who value depth, who are capable of recognizing your worth, these people are drawn to you like moths to a flame. You stop attracting projects and start attracting partners, but perhaps most importantly, you begin to see clearly. When you're not blinded by the desperate need to be chosen, you can actually evaluate whether someone is worthy of choosing you. You notice things you missed before, how they treat others, how they handle stress, how they show up when you need them. You develop what I call relationship intelligence, the ability to see people as they are, not as you wish they were. The man who once took your attention for granted now finds himself in an unfamiliar position. Your silence forces him to confront questions he's been avoiding. What does he actually want? Was he just enjoying the ego boost of your pursuit, or does he genuinely care about you as a person? Is he capable of emotional maturity, or has he been coasting on your willingness to do all the emotional work? Some men, when faced with this reality, will step up. They'll recognize that they've been taking something valuable for granted and will make genuine efforts to earn your attention rather than simply expecting it. They'll become more intentional, more present, more willing to invest in building something real with you. These are the men worth considering. Others will become more manipulative, sensing that their old tactics no longer work. They might try love bombing, future faking, or emotional manipulation to pull you back into the old dynamic. They'll promise change they have no intention of making, declare feelings they don't actually have. These men reveal themselves as emotional vampires, and your newfound clarity makes them easy to spot and avoid. But many men, perhaps most, will simply move on to someone else who's willing to play the old game. And this is perfect. These men do you the favor of removing themselves from your life, making space for better opportunities. Your elevated standards act as a natural filter, screening out the time wasters and attention seekers. And the key insight here is that you're not trying to manipulate anyone's behavior. You're not withdrawing to punish or to create artificial scarcity. You're simply refusing to participate in dynamics that don't serve you. You're saying no to breadcrumbs and yes to genuine nourishment. You're choosing quality over quantity, depth over surface level connection. This requires a fundamental shift in how you think about relationships. Instead of asking, how can I make him want me? You start asking, do I actually want him? Instead of, what can I do to keep his interests? You ask, is he interesting enough to keep mine? Instead of, how can I prove my worth to him? You declare, my worth isn't up for debate. The woman who masters this mindset becomes truly powerful, not because she can manipulate others, but because she's liberated from the exhausting cycle of seeking external validation. She sleeps well at night because her peace doesn't depend on someone else's text message. She makes decisions based on her own values rather than someone else's approval. She builds a life so fulfilling that being alone feels like a luxury rather than a punishment. When you reach this level of emotional maturity, something beautiful happens. You start attracting people who operate from the same place of wholeness. You meet men who don't need to be chased because they're confident enough to pursue what they want. You connect with people who add value to your life rather than drain it. You find relationships characterized by mutual respect, genuine interest, and natural reciprocity. But even more importantly, you discover that your worth was never actually dependent on being chosen by someone else. You were always complete, always valuable, always deserving of love and respect. The only thing that changed was your willingness to accept less than you deserve. So what does a man feel when you stop looking for him? The answer is less important than what you feel when you stop needing to be looked for. Some men will miss you deeply and make genuine efforts to win you back. Others will barely notice your absence. Most will fall somewhere in between. But your peace, your power, your sense of self-worth, these no longer depend on their response. You become like a lighthouse, steady and bright, offering guidance to those who seek it, but never chasing ships that sail away. You understand that the right people will be drawn to your light, while others will continue their journey elsewhere. And both outcomes are perfect because you're no longer willing to dim your light to make others comfortable. This transformation isn't easy, and it's not instant. It requires daily practice, constant recommitment to your own worth, and the courage to walk away from situations that don't honor your value. But once you taste this freedom, once you experience the peace that comes from being emotionally self-sufficient, you'll wonder how you ever lived any other way. The goal isn't to become cold or unavailable. It's to become discerning. It's to love from a place of fullness rather than emptiness, to give from abundance rather than desperation, to choose rather than settle. It's to understand that your attention, your time, your emotional energy are gifts to be treasured, not commodities to be bargained away for the mere hope of reciprocation. If this resonates with you, if you've ever found yourself exhausted from chasing someone who treats your pursuit as an entitlement rather than a gift, I want to hear your story. Share in the comments below. What was the moment you decided to stop chasing and start choosing yourself? What did you discover about yourself in that process? Your story might be exactly what another woman needs to hear to find her own strength and step into her own power. Remember, the woman who learns to stop chasing and start choosing herself doesn't just transform her love life, she transforms her entire existence. She becomes unstoppable in her pursuit of authentic happiness and unwavering in her commitment to her own worth. And that transformation ripples out into every relationship and experience she has for the rest of her life.